Hello everybody, this is boredlydoodling, and I'm trying out a bit of a new video today. Yes, I have a voice. Hello, welcome to my channel, those of you who are new, those of you who have been following me for a while. I know there's not many of you right now, but who knows, maybe this will be the start of something new. I got this I got this cute little microphone, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to try and create a new theme in my channel, start doing voiceovers, and talk you through some of my process. It's not the most complicated, but it gives me an opportunity to get to know you guys and let you guys get to know me a little bit. So, to kickstart this whole thing, I thought I would do the quote-unquote Meet the Artist Challenge. For those of you who don't know what the Meet the Artist Challenge is, it is basically just an excuse for us artists to introduce ourselves, show you guys kind of what we look like outside of characters and online personas, give you an idea of what kind of people we're like, and make us a bit more real than just an online figure. So for this one, I am indeed drawing myself, not a character, or I'm drawing as close to myself as my style will allow, which is a little bit more cartoony, a little bit more anime, so if it's not perfect, I'm sorry. Now, it's not always easy for me to get likenesses because of that, but I do try for when it matters. The sketching, though, was so much fun for this. Sketching is always my favorite, and I hope you can kind of see that in the different movements I get out of my sketch. I'm keeping everything very loose, very light. That helps keep motion and life in the illustration overall, because the more you work on a drawing, the stiffer it becomes. So the looser you stay in the initial sketching phase, the more life you get in the drawing overall as you work on it. So for the sketch, I've also started with a simple base body. That is rib cage, that is hips, that is how thick the legs are and how thick the arms are. And I do this before I do anything else so that I can make sure that A, all of my proportions are good and I don't accidentally end up with any long sleeves that make me look like Slender Man. And 2, I find it is a lot easier to figure out the wrinkles and folds in your clothes, like the creases in your arm sleeves, or the way a skirt will fall around the hips, if you actually have some kind of mass there to already give you guidelines. Trying to guess and just questioning if those are right doesn't always work, especially since I'm still figuring out a lot of these things myself. So hopefully that can help you if you are an artist as well. Think of the body underneath before you even attempt to add clothes on top. That's all I really got for now. So at this point, I have started the line work, which is the layer that I usually just put over a lightened sketch layer, especially digitally. For me, I find it's really kind of the simplest stage. It's very straightforward. For the most part, I just put everything that's in my sketch. I find the cleanest lines and just work on putting that into a single line instead of the 5 or 20 that I have down before. Occasionally, I will add extra lines in my line work, such as stitching in pants, in shoes. I'll add extra details to the hair that aren't in the sketch. I will add eyelashes I don't always put in the sketch. Little things that really I don't need to sketch out anymore because I've done it so much that the muscle memory comes through in the line art section. That being said, there are occasionally times I will have to go in and do a more detailed sketch, such as our cases like the hands, the feet, areas where I need a bit more structure before I can actually add any detail, because maybe I don't know how to do that off the top of my head, which is more often than not. But you can only work with what you know, and I don't know everything, so I'll do what I can. As you can see for right now, I am doing a black line art, but later on you'll see I'm going to basically just cover it with a bunch of color. I've really been enjoying this lately as the colored line art. I find it makes your illustration that much softer, it makes it a little bit brighter. As much as I love the dark outlines, I don't know, a mix of both. I found, at least for my current art style and my current phases, it really brings an extra something that a plain black line does not always have. So if you are experimenting in art yourself right now, or if you're just trying to find your own style, I highly recommend experimenting with black lines, brown lines, multicolored lines, lines that aren't there, true lineless art. Just have fun with it, because you might fall in love with something that you've never tried before. Now, a big part of this Meet the Artist challenge, the part that makes it the Meet the Artist part, is what you'll be seeing me do here, which is likes, dislikes, and what's in my bag. My likes, I have written them beside a bunch of little red hearts to show that I like them. My dislikes are beside blue crosses, because crosses generally mean no, and blue is an opposite of red, so I felt it fit. For my bag, I decided to go with the bag that is usually my go-to. I use it for school, I use it for day trips, it holds basically everything, and it's my messenger bag. And stuff that I can't really leave the house without. Sketchbook, pencils, an eraser, obviously. Hair ties, because my hair is way too long, so it easily becomes annoying. And my phone and my headphones. Music is my life, outside of art, obviously. And I cannot leave the house without some kind of sound, or it will bother me the entire day. It's the craziest thing, honestly. So my flat coloring is already done. I just sped past that really quickly. It's pretty straightforward. I mostly just use the selection tool, the paint bucket, and a really big brush, so I can fill in areas as fast as possible, so I can move on to shading, which is my second favorite part after the sketching phase. I don't know why I love shading so much, but I love the way that you can just suddenly have dimension in a flat object, on a piece of paper, on a computer screen. The fact that you can go crazy with colors or have fun with where the shadows and the highlights are placed. I don't know, it's just, I've always loved getting in and being that kind of detailed, oriented. So for the way that I do my shading, I always start off with blush. Maybe I'm weird in doing that, but I find that it's so much easier to do skin shading over top of that with a multiply layer, or just a different colored pen if I'm traditional. But multiply layer for digital, it's so much easier to go over a blush with a multiply layer than it is to try and add blushing on top of that. I find it makes it more cohesive, it ties it all together, and it doesn't look like some unnatural kind of airbrushing on top of the piece overall. So I will tend to add blush around the cheeks, right under the eyes, make them a little rosy, add some life to an area that I don't tend to actually add shading. The nose, the knees, fingers, shoulders, anywhere that you might find a bit more sun-kissed nature, that you might get a little bit more red from flushed, embarrassed, whatever the term you like is, that's where I tend to put the blushes. I'll also put a little highlight on top, and that's probably my anime influences coming out, those little shiny highlights, especially on the cheeks and the nose. You don't see them as often in my clothing coloring because I find that they're a little too harsh, but every time I do a shading layer, I will immediately do the highlight layer right after that, usually in an overlay or an almost white. Not pure white. Pure white's a little too harsh, but an almost white, so that I don't lose track of what I've done, what I have left to do, and I don't forget where my light source is. On the topic of a light source, as I'm sure you can tell with the sweater a little bit easier than you can with the face or the hands, it's very, very important that you know before you even touch your shading or your highlight, that you know where your light source is coming from. Because if you don't, then you can easily lose it and you can just have multiple different light sources. Maybe that's what you're going for, maybe you don't really care or you don't know much about light sources, but I find that I can lose it way too easily unless I decide in my head ahead of time and I keep track of it as I go, or If I don't, I will very easily wind up with a muddled, not very cohesive shading kind of illustration, and I personally don't tend to like it, so choosing a light source before I even touch my shading really helps me to keep it a cohesive piece instead of something that's been hit with a flat light. That's part of what gives it that dimension, is it looks like it's very 3D because there's an obvious source of light. Because I like to add this kind of depth and dimension to my illustrations, maybe not true realistic, because I understand that my style is about as far from realistic as you can get, but I do enjoy that 3D, that lifelike kind of coloring style. And because I do that, I tend to use the airbrush tool a lot, the blending and the blur tools. I just find that those soft edges help to further enunciate rounded edges, three-dimensionality, just a little bit better than a hard line would, like you see in a lot of shows and cartoons. For example, if you look at the way I colored the legs of my illustration, it's very soft around the edges compared to the hair. And I do that because I find that it works a little bit better for getting the kind of vision I like. The legs are usually rounder, you know, in real life. So it makes much more sense to have a softer, more rounded coloring that would imply a uniform shape. For the hair, I don't tend to use that kind of coloring style because I don't want the hair to look like a solid mass like the legs or arms would. I use a lot of line, a lot of heavy shading to try and show that hair is sectioned and can come in pieces. And I just find that the harsh and the soft work very well together if you know the right places to use them. Now, most of the shading and highlighting has already been done, so I'm moving on to adding a white outline around the character. I'm doing this because I'm not putting in a background, so in order to make the character pop a little bit more from the static white background of the illustration, I put a white outline and then a bit of a drop shadow behind it, so that there's some more dimension and it almost looks like a paper cutout instead of just a flat drawing. I tend to quite like this style, and I feel like it adds a little bit extra. With that in mind, we have finally reached the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for sticking through this with me and watching me create a little bit of an illustration about myself. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe. That lets me know that this is something you want to watch more in the future and lets me know that it's worthwhile making. And if you guys have any feedback, comments, suggestions, feel free to leave those in the comments below. That will really help me out in making better videos in the future. As well as if you have anything you want to see me draw or work on or talk about, let me know that as well. I hope you guys have a really fun day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!